welcome to Cues and Views, first on the web for collecting English billiard cues. Today I am in Liverpool and I have the pleasure and the honour of conducting an interview with Peter Clare. Hello Peter. From Thurston's, Peradon, etc. And the opportunity today is to discuss and talk about Peter's long-time experience and great knowledge of the billiards and snooker trade, and also touch on a little bit the company histories of certain companies that will be mentioned and it will see on cue badges and cue plates,
okay.
Which have been really nice. So hello Peter.
Hello David.
Are you well?
Welcome to Liverpool.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Yeah, it's a lovely city. I've not been that many times, but when I was young we used to come to New Brighton.
Oh right.
In fact,
yes,
my dad
yeah.
used to come here for his holidays.
Yeah, I could go across on the ferry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a lovely city and it's nice to be welcomed so nicely to Liverpool.
It's a pleasure.
And be standing here in the Thurston Museum. Brilliant.
Yes. Part of the collection.
Is that you or me?
Well, here we are in what is the I suppose the major part of the collection, and as you'll see, we might wander around a bit, there are a number of items pertaining to the billiard trade. I suppose one of the things I should mention is the historic connection that Thurstons have with the trade, and even going back to an association with Napoleon. I've got an old ledger here, which, if I can find the right page, it's that one there. It says, Mr. Darling for the 20th Regiment at foot, St. Helena, 1819, and they were having 60 extra cues and 4 maces. Well, Thurston's actually supplied the table to St. Helena for Napoleon to while his hours away in captivity, and there's a reference to some of the equipment that was supplied to them. So that Thurston's has this long association with the trade. They introduced slate beds, they introduced rubber cushions and vulcanized cushions. The table as we know today, which most of us call a snooker table, is basically based on a Thurston table, which was decided to be the standard table back in about 1892 by the governing body of the time. So any table you play on these days is based on a Thurston table. That's why the history side of it, which my father became so interested in, is why instead of trading as E.A. Clare and Son, we trade as Thurstons, because the history from his interest was Thurstons, and Thurstons is the name that we use these days. We have all sorts of things in the collection. We have, I quite often ask people coming around why we should have an empty light bulb. For those of you who don't know, if I hold that up, you'll recognise it as the start of a billiard ball or a snooker ball, and you can see that there is a similarity. They're moulded in glass light bulbs, and then the glass is just broken off. It starts off its life like that, and there's a rather larger version of a green ball. They then centralist ground to get down to the balls that we know today, and that's still how they're made by the well-known company that make the G1 ball over in Belgium. What other things have we got? Well, again, my father was the reason we started the collection, and things like this used to fascinate him. Where it goes back to what about the on this particular one, out and out to Hebrides. We went to a castle out there to recover the table, and lo and behold, you can see, I hope that it's handmade nails. The rubber in it is strip rubber, and on the slip which would hold the cloth in together, it says Sir E.H. Scott Bart, George Hay, 2nd of August 1887, new cloth. So prior to us recovering the table in the 1973, the last time the table had been covered was 1887. That's the sort of thing that started my father's interest off, and it then developed a bit like Topsy. He didn't just specialise in one item, he goes for all sorts of things. So we have little things like this, which is a rest for a player with a disability, or perhaps one arm. You can put it on like that, and lo and behold, you can then play your shots. In more recent times, because of my interest, we get silly things like this, which is a a cue from, I suppose, an amusement arcade. You actually load the cue. You can't fire it, but you can adjust the tension, and then when you get into the right position, you can pull the trigger and play your shot. All sorts of strange things. Thurston's well known. Burroughs and Watts is another name which David can recommend cues from. We have a collection over here of old sets of rules which really list the history of the game. Gillows of Lancaster were probably the first people to sell tables seriously as a commercial enterprise. Then you went to Thurston's, who we think served his time with Gillows, and they set up specifically to make tables from 1799, but were incorporated as a company in 1815. And then you got Burroughs and Watts, the other famous name. This set of rules we have up because it's of particular interest, because it says many years with J. Thurston. So we can now say that Burroughs and Watts actually learnt the trade at Thurston's. Other things you can now see here, the trade, or shall we say the people who run billiard halls, have always tried to take money off you. So this one here, there's a slot for pennies to go in. You could actually adjust the amount of take by putting more washers on. When eventually it had the right amount in, the scales would tip, allow you to start using the scoreboard. As you turned it round, it would release the money into the coin box at the bottom, and that would take money off you. And there was this one as well. Again, you couldn't start scoring until you put your penny in, and then you can start. They only allowed you to score before you had to put another penny in. So we've always tried to make sure that they had sufficient money coming in to pay for recovering the billiard table.
You started in the family business,
I did indeed, yes, when I was 18 and I left school. I did do a college course on business studies, but even before joining the business seriously, I came down during my school holidays.
Right.
In fact, I came down with my grandfather, who used to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and go home at 4 o'clock. And he used to go round the corner at midday to the pub, have a pint of Guinness, and then have a sleep in the afternoon. So
sounds like my kind of man.
It's the sort of thing I should be doing, I think, myself nowadays.
Well, thankfully we've caught you between naps, and we can delve into your history and knowledge and find out as much as we possibly can today, and share with the people who tune into our videos. So the company that you're associated with is E.A. Clare.
And Son Limited, yeah.
And Son Limited.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see on cue badges the name Iralk.
Yes, which as you probably realise, is the name Clare backwards.
Indeed.
So I think it was my father. Whether my father came up with the idea of being backward, I'm not sure, but
right. Okay. But it looks a nice name. It's like a bit like Eureka you see on Burroughs.
In a way, yes. Yeah,
Burwatt,
yes.
you know, it's a nice little catchy name for catching the attention of the customer.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So. This company goes back to, I think it was founded in 1912.
It was indeed, yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
And I have one or two cues with the E.A. Clare name and some Clare, Thurston, Padmore.
Yeah, yeah.
Because over time I understand that you acquired various companies, and various companies.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. We the Thurstons was the first one, which was in the mid '60s. They were still based in Cheney Walk in those days, very posh part of Chelsea. And very shortly after we took them over, they had to move out, and ended up in another now very posh part of the country, in Primrose Hill. So that they've moved around. But since then, unfortunately, we now don't have an office in London anymore. It's all done here from Liverpool. Padmore's was acquired a bit later on, and we actually still have a member of the Padmore family who's actually a fourth generation still in the business.
Now, if I'm right in thinking Padmore was a Midlands-based
It was
company,
in Birmingham, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Now you sometimes see Padmore anniversary cues for
Yes.
the 125th anniversary of Padmore,
yes.
Which were 1955.
It was, yes.
And those cues are often rosewood buttered, and machine spliced, and lovely badge.
A relatively simple cue, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost like a club cue, but
Yes,
a nice example of a club
indeed,
cue.
indeed.
Now, those there's been one or two of those on eBay recently, and they're doing okay. What I like about such cues is that they help you date other cues because of the weight stamp and because of the design.
Right, yes, yeah.
So
yes.
they're very helpful to us cue collectors. Now, so Padmore became part of the organisation. Do you know anything about Birmingham Billiard Works and how that fitted into the Birmingham scene?
Not a lot. They've obviously been around for quite a number of years, and haven't really, shall we say, broken in to being that well known.
No.
But they have been around for quite a number of years.
Well, for the Camkin connection, because
Yes,
Bill Camkin was one of the, I think, directors
It
of
was
it.
indeed,
Yeah.
yes, and obviously was probably better known
Well, yeah.
as Camkins, yes.
Yeah, Camkins, and also he was one of the co-promoters of the first World Snooker Championship with
Yes,
Joe Davis,
yes.
and a good friend of Joe Davis's. As we've said, your organisation's sort of incorporated other companies.
Indeed.
And effectively kept the traditions of those companies going.
We have tried, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
well, I think you've done very well because you've got your involvement with Peradon as well.
Yes.
Which is a cue company that is very close to my heart and many cue collectors' hearts. A, because it goes back to 1885.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's got a very long established history. But again, selfishly, from our interest point of view, it's one of the companies who was massively into using professional players' names and likenesses to stimulate the interest of the customer. And also, I think, that pushed the standard of the cues up, certainly in the heyday of
I think sorry about that. And in the heyday, I think you're right in that sense that the professionals themselves would put input into what the cue they wanted. It wasn't just, we'll have that cue and put a name on it.
Absolutely.
They came in, and a lot of the cues were copies of the cues that they had actually used to make their name.
Now, when we say copies, what we actually mean is a term that was used back then, facsimile cues.
Indeed, yes. Yeah.
A replica.
Yeah, a replica is probably a better description. Yeah.
Of the actual cues that the player used. Now, today, cue makers like Tony Glover from Glover's are making replica Burwatt Champions and replica Eurekas and things like that, and Yield Ash cues. But what we're talking about is a close facsimile
of the cue that the player actually used.
Yeah.
Yes.
With, as you say, with the direct input of that player saying what type of timbers, how it should look, and to an extent the taper and how it should play.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So if you look at some that we've got in the collection, some old patent books, and there are patents in there that the players have actually patented shapes of cues.
Excellent. Now, if we look at Peradon's history for a moment, we'll stay on this topic for a minute because this to me is incredibly fascinating. We see things like the picture badge peels, the standard record break peel cues, as used perhaps by W.J. Peel, although he was only 4'9" or something like that. So they manufactured with the general player in mind, so a lot of them are 58 inches long and so on. Those cues are numerous, and so what we're looking for when we're collecting is a very good quality example, the best example that we can find. And of course, they are Peradon cues, and they are good top quality cues.
Yeah.
In terms of this, and of course, how could I leave it out? You also had Joe Davis's name,
yes.
Walter Lindrum,
yes.
Clark McConaughey,
and Horace
Inman,
Lindrum,
Horace Lindrum.
Yeah.
Almost all the top players of almost any given day that weren't.
Over the years, yes, because we've done Ray Reid, we've done Steve Davis, we've done quite a few of the top name players in their day, and John Parrott, indeed, a good scouser.
Yeah, absolutely. So right up to relatively modern times, Peradon has closely associated itself with professional players, and therefore had an eye on producing quality.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You mentioned about Wieldings and McMorrans, which of course are all part now of Peradon's. The interesting thing, I think, from some people's point of view, might be that in the days when Peradon's and Wieldings first came together, they used the Wielding name for the UK market, and the Peradon name for the export market.
Right.
And of course, at that time, there probably was only Peradons making cues in the whole of the British Commonwealth, and so wherever snooker was being played, Peradon cues were being used. Apart from in the UK, where Wielding cues were being used. The McMorran one is a bit more problematic in that, yes, it's part of the group, and they produced Permac cues at one time with using the McMorran World as the trademark. But I've only ever had one catalogue of McMorrans. Whereas the Peradon and Wielding catalogues go back to the sort of 1920s, that we've got almost a complete range of those. So it's one of those things that obviously there was the development in London of the cue makers mainly being in and around London, until Peradons moved out to Andover when they redeveloped around the old London haunts.
Now, interestingly, again, a lot of people think that Permac is something to do with Clark McConaughey, the Mac being McConaughey, and of course it's not.
It's not.
It's
McMorran.
McMorran.
Yes.
I think that's useful that people should know that, because it's like a sort of an old wives' tale almost that goes around.
Well, you can see why they might have thought it,
Yeah.
but it is. Yes, it is. You can tell really by the fact that they use the McMorran trademark as the Permac trademark eventually.
So cues that became known as Wieldings cues and became almost famous as great playing cues include the Cannon match cue.
Yes.
Now, the Cannon match cue, again, who would have made those?
Well, they will have been made by Peradons,
Right.
but sold in the UK as Wieldings.
Exactly.
For some reason, they decided to keep the two names separate and to run the two names, so that although the catalogues that they sent out were Peradon and Wielding catalogues,
Absolutely.
they just said that in the UK market you buy from Wieldings and the export market you buy from Peradons.
Yes. Now, again, Cannon match cues have been known to command decent prices for a really good playing cue. So again, it's a testament to the Peradon
Well,
brand, if you like.
they obviously they made good cues, and at that time the terrible thing to say, there was a more limited choice. But I would also say that probably at that time the quality of the timber that was readily available allowed them to be more selective, so that the range of cues, on the better cues, they could use the highest grade ash and maple, and the higher grades of the hardwoods.
Yes. Now, after the war, it becomes obvious to a collector who's seen a lot of cues that woods that are used, like hornbeam, which is sometimes referred to as poor man's maple, which is only because I think of its association after the war.
Well, I think also that after the war, obviously some of the timbers were difficult to get hold of. Hornbeam was probably more readily available because hornbeam is used quite a lot in the tool industry, for things like hammer shafts, etc. And so if the timber was available, it was something, and they will have tried other things over the years, because there are cues around where Thurston's have tried to make a split cane cue.
Absolutely.
So people had tried all sorts of things, and hornbeam probably, as you say, is close to maple. It could perform a bit like a maple cue.
And Peradon's not shy of innovation themselves, as you will well know, with the laminated cues and things like that, in an attempt to keep them incredibly straight and strong.
Yes, yeah. This is one of these things, is that when you think about the actual dimensions you end up with a cue, to try and keep that straight, particularly as most, that's unkind, a lot of cueists are rather unkind to their cues, using it to applaud, leaving it against the wall when they go and get their pint. It doesn't help the cue.
No.
But basically, really, if you start off with a straight piece of ash or maple, unless it's very badly abused, it should really remain relatively straight.
That's right. And as many cues that I've got, which are approaching 100 years old or over, and are still straight to this day because they've been fortunately looked after, put in a case.
Well, I think that they've been looked after, as you say, putting them in a case. One of the things really is that a cue should always be stored upright.
Yes.
I know in a lot of times the cues used to be also sometimes stored underneath the table, when they'd be then stored horizontal. But if you store them vertically, I suppose you've got gravity helping you to keep it straight.
Absolutely. So there we go. I think your company's got, all the companies have maintained the heritage, have kept the traditions going, and they are certainly something that you can be proud of, that you've had a profitable association.
Well, that's very kind of you. One of the things we do, I suppose part of the thing is that we do have our historic collection, is that has kept us aware of things that have been tried in the past, and when we are thinking of new ideas, we sometimes come back and have a look around to see it's been done before and it didn't work, so we know we're safe not to do it. Again, as a little tale out of school, my father used to almost take delight in when people would write in saying, we've just invented this new idea, and as I said earlier, we've got patent books, and he'd go through the patent books and say, well, terribly sorry, but in this something like 1870, this was already patented, so it's not a new idea.
Absolutely. The collection that you have here inspired me. I came probably about 15 years ago, even more, with Andy Hunter, who's a friend of Q's and Views and contributor, and you know Andy, don't you?
I did, yes.
We came here and I saw the variety that you had, and it inspired me to continue and to collect and to look out for variations and things like that, and not to be prejudiced against some of them, what I would consider newer collectibles, the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, well, I think that eventually they're going to be the next generation to be collectibles, aren't they? The thing that I think is probably different in our collection to, perhaps, I know you rather specialise in cues. We've got the cue collection,
yes.
But the collection we've got sort of covers most aspects of the industry. So we've even got, I think you probably saw when you came here, a pocket plate that was in the riots at the whole prison many years ago, which was twisted. It's just sort of that sort of things that fascinate me, that they have the association to the trade. So we have things like cigarette lighters, there's all sorts of different bridges that have been used over the years.
Yeah, also known as rests.
Yeah, the rests, yes. Yeah. So we've got a sort of a fairly wide collection. We don't actually specialise in any one thing.
That's right.
And in some cases, as you know, I will refer people who ask questions about cues back to you, because you've got a better knowledge on cues than I have. But on other things, on tables, etc., I've probably got a better knowledge than you. So if we can work together, it works well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you. I wish you every success with continuing to pull the collection together and researching into the history, which you've already put together a phenomenal website as well.
Well, thank you.
And it's all helpful to us as we learn more about our past interests.
Well, I think also we're rather a specialised industry, aren't we, in the sense, and who else is going to keep the history if you would do your work on the cues and we don't keep our collection together?
Yes.
There's things, that we've got this MIP table, which you've seen in the corner over here, which is completely and utterly useless bit of equipment for billiards and snooker, but if we don't keep it, it will be lost, and people will sometimes think, what the heck was a MIP table? We've got one to show you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.